Inside the transfer system, how Mississippi moves inmates to Parchman Penitentiary. In Mississippi, most people never see what happens after a judge reads a sentence. They hear remanded to the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections and assume the story is finished. But for the person standing in that courtroom, it is only the beginning. Their journey moves through holding cells, stacks of paperwork, transport schedules, and long hours waiting for a vehicle that will take them deep into the Mississippi Delta. For many inmates, that road leads to one of the most well-known prisons in the South, the Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchman. Built on old plantation land and surrounded by miles of open fields, Parchman has been the center of Mississippi's prison system for more than a century. And every week, new inmates quietly enter its gates through a transfer process the public rarely sees, but one that shapes every step of their incarceration. Before we dive in, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to HFDHI Crimes. Every bit of support helps us reveal the hidden truths behind the world's prisons and crime documentaries. Now, let's go inside. For most inmates in Mississippi, the path to Parchman starts long before they ever see the prison's distant fields. It begins inside a county courtroom at the moment the judge announces the sentence. The room falls quiet. Paperwork is signed, and officers escort the individual out. But despite what many people think, this does not mean they enter the state prison system immediately. Instead, they are taken to the county jail, where the real transfer process quietly begins. Inside the jail, the inmate becomes part of a system that now moves according to state rules. The county clerk prepares the commitment papers, the official documents that hand legal custody over to the Mississippi Department of Corrections. These papers contain the sentence, the charges, and the order authorizing MDOC to take the inmate. Only after MDOC receives these documents can the transfer process even start. But movement doesn't happen right away. Mississippi doesn't pick up inmates daily. Instead, the inmate waits, sometimes a few days, sometimes weeks, until MDOC places him on an upcoming transport schedule. This waiting period is one of the most misunderstood parts of the journey. To the public, it looks like nothing is happening. In reality, this is when the state reviews space availability, staffing levels, medical needs, and the number of inmates that need to be moved from each county. Inside the jail, staff handles several steps quietly in the background. They verify the inmate's identity, check for outstanding warrants from other jurisdictions, update medical records, and note any special needs. Some inmates are flagged for separation due to known conflicts or safety issues. Others may require medical documents or prescriptions to be forwarded to the state. During this time, the inmate is simply waiting in a holding pattern. They may not be told the exact day of their transfer for security reasons. Many learn they're leaving only when officers arrive at their cell early in the morning. This uncertainty is part of the process, designed to reduce risks such as escape attempts, disruptions, or outside interference. Meanwhile, MDOC prepares a transport order, the document that officially authorizes the inmate's movement from county custody into the state system. This order includes the inmate's name, sentencing information, temporary security classification, and their intake destination. For many long-term male offenders, that destination is the Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchman. Once the transport order is complete, the inmate is placed on the upcoming roster. County staff gather their property, update logs, and prepare for the moment MDOC officers arrive. This marks a shift in responsibility. Up to this point, the inmate has been physically held by the county, but legally assigned to the state. When MDOC arrives, that balance changes. This stage may seem simple from the outside, but for the inmate, it is the moment their sentence becomes real. The familiar world of the county jail, noisy, crowded, and often chaotic, is about to be replaced by something far larger and more permanent. The next time they leave their cell, they won't be returning. They'll be stepping onto a transport van headed toward the heart of the Mississippi Delta, toward the vast and isolated grounds of Parchman. After sentencing, the inmate enters a stage that most people never think about, the county jail holding period. This is the stretch of time between the judge's order and the moment MDOC physically arrives to retrieve the inmate. It may look uneventful from the outside, but this period is full of steps, checks, and decisions that shape how and when an inmate is finally moved to Parchman. The first step begins with paperwork. Once the commitment papers are forwarded from the courthouse to the county clerk, they are prepared and sent to MDOC. These documents confirm the inmate's sentence, charges, and the legal authority allowing the state to take custody. Without them, no transport can be scheduled. County staff ensure every page is correct because even a small mistake can delay the transfer. Inside the jail, the inmate is placed with others who are waiting for the same process. The environment varies from county to county. Some jails are overcrowded, while others have more space. But one thing is constant: uncertainty. Inmates rarely know when they will be moved. The schedule is controlled by MDOC and is not shared publicly. This secrecy exists for security reasons, and it means inmates often learn about their transfer only hours before it happens. During this waiting period, several important tasks take place behind the scenes. County staff update medical files, noting any conditions that MDOC should be aware of. If the inmate has prescriptions, these are documented so the state can continue treatment. Staff also check for outstanding warrants from other agencies. If another county or state wants the inmate before MDOC takes them, that may change the order of movement. In some cases, inmates are flagged for special handling. For example, someone with a known conflict or gang affiliation may require separation to avoid violence. Another inmate may need medical transportation due to a chronic condition. These notes are added to file, so MDOC knows how to plan the transfer. The length of this holding period varies widely. In smaller counties, inmates might be moved within a week. In larger counties with crowded jails, delays can stretch longer due to limited transport capacity or statewide backlogs. These delays have been the focus of investigations in Mississippi, especially when jail populations rise fast and the state can transfer inmates out. Still, this waiting time is not wasted. It is the phase where the inmate's information is verified, their status is updated, and the groundwork is laid for the state to take over. Everything must match: name, sentence, charges, medical records, and property logs. If any detail is missing, MDOC can refuse the transfer until the county corrects it. Eventually, once MDOC schedules a pickup, the county begins preparing for transport day. Property is gathered and sealed. Medical files are printed. Officers make sure the inmate is ready to move at any moment. The inmate may sense that something is happening, but they are rarely told the exact day. And then, usually before sunrise, officers arrive at the cell door. They confirm the inmate's identity, apply restraints, and notify them that they are being transported. The quiet waiting period ends, and the transfer process moves into its next stage, the moment when MDOC officers arrive, take legal control, and the inmate's journey toward Parchman truly begins. Before an inmate can leave the county jail and enter the state system, one document becomes the center of everything: the transport order. This is the official authorization that allows MDOC to physically move an inmate from county custody into state custody. Without it, no bus starts, no restraints are applied, and no inmate is taken anywhere. The transport order is created only after MDOC reviews the commitment papers sent by the county. It includes the inmate's full legal name, sentencing details, temporary classification level, and any special notes the state must consider. These notes may include medical conditions, separation requirements, or alerts about past behavior. If the inmate has a history of escape attempts or serious violence, that information is clearly marked. The transport order is designed to give transport officers everything they need to move the inmate safely. Once the order is confirmed, the inmate is added to the transport schedule. This schedule is not public, and it is not shown to inmates. Even the county jail staff may only know the day, not the exact hour. This level of secrecy is intentional. It reduces security risks, prevents anyone from planning interference, and ensures that movement happens quietly and without attention. On the county side, preparation begins long before MDOC arrives. Officers gather property logs, medical documents, and identification records. Every page must be correct. If something is missing or inaccurate, MDOC can delay the transfer, meaning the inmate remains in county custody until the issue is fixed. Transport day usually begins in the early morning, often before sunrise. County officers receive the transport list and start preparing the inmate scheduled to move. One by one, cells are opened, names are confirmed, and searches are conducted to ensure no contraband comes with the inmate. Restraints are applied according to classification level. Most inmates are placed in handcuffs and waist chains. Higher-risk individuals may also wear leg restraints. While this is happening, MDOC transport officers are preparing on their end. Before they even arrive at the county jail, they meet at their base to review the day's assignments. They go through each inmate's file, checking for alerts, medical needs, or separation rules. Officers also inspect their vehicles, checking fuel, tires, security locks, interior barriers, radio equipment, and emergency gear. A transport vehicle cannot be used unless it passes all inspections. When MDOC arrives at the county jail, the shift in custody becomes official. County officers hand over the commitment papers, medical files, and property records. MDOC officers review everything carefully. This is a key moment. Once the documents are signed, responsibility for the inmate fully transfers from the county to the state. From that point on, MDOC controls every step of the inmate's movement. The inmate is then escorted from the holding area to the transport vehicle. This process is slow and controlled. Each person is checked again for identity, searched a final time, and boarded under supervision. Some inmates are seated separately due to risk or separation needs. Others may be placed in individual compartments if required. Before departure, MDOC officers conduct one more head count. This count must match the transport order exactly. Only when everything aligns does the vehicle leave the county jail. This stage marks a major shift in the inmate's journey. The waiting period is over. The paperwork is complete. The inmate is no longer in a temporary system. They are now officially moving toward the state's long-term correctional network. And for many, that path has taken them straight toward one of Mississippi's oldest and most significant prisons, Parchman. When the transport vehicle finally leaves the county jail, the inmate enters one of the most controlled phases of the entire Mississippi correctional system. This part of the journey is long, quiet, and tightly regulated from start to finish. For many inmates, it is their first direct experience with the state prison system, and although nothing about the ride is dramatic, it is one of the most important steps that decides how and where they will live next. The vehicle itself is designed specifically for inmate movement. Mississippi uses a mix of secure vans and large transport buses, each built with reinforced interiors, barred or mesh windows, steel barriers, and locked compartments. These vehicles are not meant for comfort. They are built to maintain security and reduce risks during long trips across the state. Inside, inmates sit in assigned positions based on their classification, separation alerts, or medical needs. Higher-risk inmates may be placed in isolated sections or closer to officers for constant monitoring. Before the vehicle pulls away, officers check restraints again. Handcuffs, waist chains, and sometimes leg irons remain on throughout the ride. These restraints aren't removed unless there is a medical emergency, and during the trip, officers follow strict rules. No unauthorized conversations, no unscheduled stops, and no movement inside the vehicle without instructions. As the transport begins, the atmosphere is usually silent. Some inmates look out the small, barred windows, seeing places they might not pass again for many years. Others sit still, understanding that this ride is the final step before entering the state's long-term correctional world. For most, the route is unfamiliar. Inmates rarely know which roads they are on because MDOC never reveals transport paths for safety reasons. The convoy follows predetermined routes planned to minimize risks. These paths avoid unnecessary stops, reduce time in high-traffic areas, and ensure strong radio signal coverage in case officers need to communicate with other units. Mississippi's transport teams rely heavily on routine and structure. Any deviation is taken seriously. Hours may pass as the vehicle travels deeper into the Mississippi Delta. The landscape begins to change. Traffic becomes lighter. Small towns fade away. Long stretches of farmland take over. The further the vehicle goes, the more isolated the surroundings become, a deliberate factor in Parchman's original location. When the prison was built in the early 1900s, distance was seen as one of the most effective security features. The remoteness made escape nearly impossible and limited public access. As the vehicle approaches Sunflower County, inmates sense the shift. Fields stretch endlessly across the horizon. The road narrows, and the area grows still. For many inmates, this is the moment when the reality of their sentence becomes clear. They are leaving the county system behind and entering a place known for over a century as the center of Mississippi's prison network. Before arrival, officers inside the vehicle radio ahead to notify Parchman's intake team. Staff at the gate prepare to receive the transport. The vehicle slows as it approaches the entrance, a long road that leads to the secure front gate. At the gate, a strict protocol begins. Officers step out and present their credentials. Names of the inmates being delivered are checked against the transport list. The vehicle is inspected for tampering, unauthorized items, or anything that could pose security risk. This inspection can include checking the undercarriage, compartments, seals, and locks. While the full details are not shared for safety reasons, this process follows standard procedures used in high-security facilities across the country. Once the inspection is complete, the first gate opens. The vehicle moves inside a secure area between two lock gates. Only when the outer gate closes behind them does the inner gate open. A double gate system designed to prevent breaches and ensure all movement is controlled. For the inmates, this moment is unmistakable. Once the transport passes through the second gate, they have officially entered Parchman. The noise of the outside world fades, replaced by the controlled environment of the Mississippi State Penitentiary. The long ride is over, and the next phase, intake and processing, is about to begin. Once the transport vehicle passes through the second gate, the inmates enter one of the most organized and controlled parts of the entire Mississippi prison system. Intake and processing. This is the stage that decides where each inmate will live, what restrictions they will face, and how their time inside Parchman will begin. The first step is unloading. Inmates exit the bus one at a time, while officers check restraints and conduct a new head count. The number of inmates leaving the vehicle must match the number on the transport list. Even small errors must be corrected before anyone moves forward. From there, inmates are led to secure intake area, separated from operational units and general population. Inside this area, MDOC staff receive paperwork from the transport team, commitment papers, medical files, property logs, and identification forms. Officers verify every detail, from names and dates to sentencing information. This is the moment where legal responsibility fully transfers to the state. Next come separation protocols. If an inmate has known conflicts, gang ties, or safety concerns, they are immediately held apart from the group. Mississippi's prison system has faced incidents tied to incompatible housing, so early separation is a major part of reducing risk. Once separated, inmates undergo a full intake search. Clothing is inspected, medical devices are checked, and officers make sure nothing unauthorized enters the facility. Property is logged carefully. Items inmates are allowed to keep are documented. Everything else is stored to be returned at release or later transfer. After the search, inmates move into medical screening, a step required by law. Staff perform a basic physical exam, check vital signs, conduct tuberculosis screening, and complete a mental health assessment. They document injuries, chronic conditions, and medications the inmate may need. Some inmates are cleared for general housing, while others may need follow-up evaluation or placement in the infirmary. Once medical checks are complete, inmates move into identification and digital processing. Officers take fingerprints and intake photographs for ID cards and internal databases. Staff then enter detailed information into MDOC's statewide system, including sentence length, custody status, medical alerts, detainers, and separation orders. This digital file will guide classification and future housing decisions. With the record complete, inmates reach the most important stage, classification. Classification determines custody level and placement. Staff evaluate the offense, sentence length, escape history, past institutional behavior, gang indicators, mental health needs, and medical status. Most inmates receive a temporary classification that will be reviewed more deeply later. Following classification, inmates are issued state clothing and essential supplies. This normally includes a uniform, undergarments, socks, shoes, bedding, and basic hygiene items. Availability can vary, but these items form the minimum standard required for housing. The final step is housing assignment. Based on classification, medical needs, bed space, and separation requirements, inmates are sent to their assigned unit. Parchman has a wide range of housing options: maximum security units, medium security areas, agricultural units, mental health sections, medical facilities, and death row. When inmates enter their housing unit, officers show them their bed and explain the rules. They learn meal schedules, yard time procedures, and how movement inside the unit works. For many, this is a moment when reality settles in. They have left the temporary world of county jails behind and entered one of the most historic and structured prisons in the South. This final step completes the inmate's journey through the transfer system, a process built on routine, policy, and security, quietly moving people into the vast network behind Parchman's walls. After entering Parchman's intake unit, every inmate moves into a critical stage that shapes how they will be managed inside the prison: medical screening. This step is not optional. It is required by state policy, federal guidelines, and decades of court rulings that define how prisons must evaluate the physical and mental health of every new arrival. For many inmates, this screening is their first direct interaction with Parchman's medical system. Medical screening begins shortly after the search and property inventory. Inmates are escorted into a designated medical area where nurses and medical staff start the evaluation process. The purpose is simple: identify medical needs, prevent the spread of disease, and ensure each inmate is placed where they can be safely supervised. The first part of the screening is a basic physical exam. Staff record height, weight, blood pressure, and other vital signs. Although this step seems routine, it helps flag conditions that require immediate attention. Some inmates arrive with untreated injuries past surgeries or conditions that were not fully documented at the county level. Next comes tuberculosis, TB, screening, a requirement in prison systems nationwide. TB can spread quickly in a correctional environment, so identifying positive cases early is essential. Inmates may receive a skin test, an X-ray, or follow-up testing depending on the facility's procedures and the inmate's medical history. A mental health evaluation follows. Staff look for signs of severe stress, confusion, withdrawal, or other symptoms that require closer monitoring. This part of the screening also helps identify inmates who may need special housing, additional assessments, or protective placement. Mississippi's correctional system has faced scrutiny in the past for handling of mental health needs, so intake evaluations play a major role in preventing incidents. Medical screening also includes documenting pre-existing conditions. Some inmates arrive with chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, asthma, or heart disease. Others have past injuries, mobility issues, or long-term medical needs that require medication or regular treatment. Staff update these details and verify prescriptions to prevent gaps in care. Another important part of intake is identifying inmates with injuries or conditions caused by previous incidents. These must be documented clearly. Proper documentation protects the inmate, ensures accurate medical records, and helps prevent misunderstandings about when and where the injuries occurred. Once evaluations are complete, inmates are categorized based on their medical status. Some are cleared for regular housing. Others may require placement in the infirmary or specialized areas equipped for medical supervision. Those with chronic conditions may be scheduled for follow-up appointments with doctors or mental health staff. During this stage, staff also check whether the inmate has medical restrictions that affect their classification or housing placement. For example, an inmate with severe mobility issues may not be housed in a unit with stairs. Someone with a contagious illness cannot immediately enter general population. These decisions help reduce risk and ensure the prison can manage each inmate properly. The final part of medical screening involves updating DOC's digital record system. Each inmate's file is marked with medical alerts, medication lists, and notes about required follow-ups. These records guide staff in every unit across the prison and shape decisions about where the inmate will live next. By the time medical screening ends, Parchman has a clear picture of the inmate's physical and mental health. This information becomes a major factor in classification and housing assignment. For the inmate, this stage may feel routine, but it quietly influences every part of their daily life in the prison, from where they sleep to how closely they are supervised. After medical screening, every inmate entering Parchman moves into the next major step of the intake process: identification, and digital record creation. This stage ensures that the state has accurate, up-to-date information on each inmate and can track them securely throughout their time in custody. It may seem routine, but it is one of the most important parts of the entire transfer system. The first part is fingerprinting. Even though most inmates were fingerprinted at the county jail, MDOC requires a new set. This ensures that the inmate's identity is fully verified within the state system. Officers scan each finger and upload the prints directly into MDOC's statewide database. These prints are used for internal records, background checks, and verification during future movements. Next comes intake photographs. Inmates stand in front of a neutral background, while officers take standardized photos. These pictures are not just for ID cards. They are stored in Parchman's central database and linked to every part of the inmate's digital file. Photos help staff identify the inmate during counts, medical appointments, transfers, and disciplinary hearings. After fingerprints and photos, staff begin building the inmate's digital profile. This is one of the most detailed parts of the intake process. Every inmate receives a digital record inside MDOC's offender tracking system. The file includes full name, MDOC number, sentence length, charges, custody status, and parole eligibility. Staff also add information collected earlier in the process, such as medical alerts, mental health notes, and any separation requirements. The digital file also includes classification indicators. If the inmate has a known gang affiliation, documented conflict, escape history, or history of violence, this information is marked clearly. These indicators guide decisions about housing placement, movement restrictions, and supervision levels. Another part of the digital record involves detainers and holds. If another county, another state, or a federal agency has an open warrant or pending case involving the inmate, this is added to the file. This information determines what happens when the inmate finishes their sentence or if they must be transferred again later. Once the profile is complete, staff upload all scanned documents, commitment papers, court records, medical forms, property logs, and intake photos. These documents stay in the inmate's file for the entire duration of their incarceration. Every department inside Parchman, medical, classification, security, transportation, relies on this digital record to make decisions. The next step is issuing the inmate ID card. This small card contains the inmate's photo, name, MDOC number, and sometimes a barcode or classification code. It is used during movement, commissary, medical visits, and certain programs. While inmates cannot keep the card with them at all times in maximum security areas, it becomes part of their daily life inside the prison system. Throughout this process, accuracy is critical. Even a small data error can lead to issues later. Incorrect housing placement, lost property, missed medical appointments, or delays in future transfers. For this reason, intake staff double-check entries before finalizing the record. By the time identification and digital processing ends, MDOC has a complete, organized file that follows the inmate through every stage of their sentence. This file also allows Parchman to track movement, monitor behavior, and coordinate with other facilities if the inmate is transferred again. For the inmate, this stage may feel repetitive, but it marks an important shift. They are no longer a temporary entry or a name on a county list. They are now fully entered into the state system, documented, indexed, and officially part of Mississippi's long-term correctional structure. Once identification and digital records are completed, inmates move into one of the most influential stages of the entire intake process, classification. This is the point where Parchman decides how each inmate will be housed, supervised, and managed. Classification affects everything: daily routines, access to programs, level of movement, and overall safety. For many inmates, this single decision shapes their entire experience inside the prison. Classification begins with a detailed review of the inmate's digital file. Staff look at the severity of the offense, sentence length, and any mandatory requirements that come from court orders. Someone serving a long, serious sentence is usually assigned a higher custody level than someone with a shorter or nonviolent conviction. These decisions follow guidelines set by MDOC to create consistency across the system. Next, staff evaluate institutional history. If the inmate has been incarcerated before, officers check for past disciplinary issues, escape attempts, or violent incidents. Inmates with a history of serious infractions may be placed under tighter supervision. If the inmate is entering the prison system for the first time, classification relies more heavily on their charges and background information. Medical and mental health notes from screening are also part of this decision. An inmate with severe medical needs may be placed closer to the infirmary. Someone with diagnosed mental health conditions might be evaluated for specialized housing or additional oversight. Mississippi has faced challenges in the past with managing these populations, so intake classification helps reduce risks early. Another critical part of classification is identifying gang affiliation and separation needs. Staff review indicators, tattoos, statements, or documented conflicts from previous incarcerations. If an inmate has known enemies or belongs to a group that must be kept apart, those notes are entered into the system. Separation orders help prevent violence by keeping incompatible inmates in different units. Once all factors are reviewed, the classification team assigns a temporary custody level. This level determines where the inmate will be housed until a full classification review occurs later. Levels range from minimum to maximum security, but most inmates arriving at Parchman receive medium or close custody due to the nature of the facility. The team also selects the type of housing unit that fits the inmate's needs. Parchman has a variety of units. Maximum security housing for high-risk inmates, medium security areas for general population, agricultural and work units, specialized mental health and medical units, protective custody areas, death row for inmates sentenced to capital punishment. Every assignment depends on classification. Bed space also matters. Sometimes an inmate who qualifies for one unit may be temporarily placed in another until space opens. Even with strict rules, logistics play a large role in where inmates are placed. Classification staff also consider program eligibility. Some units have access to education, work details, or treatment programs. Inmates with short sentences or good behavior history may be assigned to units where these opportunities exist. Others with serious offenses or high-risk designations may have fewer options. By the end of the classification process, the inmate's temporary custody level, housing area, and restrictions are officially entered into the MDOC system. Officers then prepare to move the inmate to the appropriate unit. For the inmate, classification marks a turning point. Up until this moment, they have been in temporary holding areas, unsure where they will end up. Once classification is complete, the path becomes clearer. They know whether they will live in a high-security area, a regular housing unit, or a specialized facility. They also gain their first sense of how strict their daily routine will be. Although classification may seem like paperwork from the outside, it plays a major role in maintaining safety and structure inside Parchman. It determines how inmates interact with staff, what privileges they have, and how closely they must be monitored. It is a quiet decision in the intake process, but one that shapes every day that follows. After classification is completed, inmates enter a straightforward but important stage, receiving state-issued clothing and basic supplies. This step marks a shift from temporary processing to becoming part of Parchman's daily population. Everything the inmate receives is standardized, controlled, and recorded, forming the foundation of their life inside the facility. The process begins when officers call inmates in small groups to a supply area inside the intake unit. Here, staff issue the standard MDOC uniform. Every inmate receives a set of state clothing that includes pants, a shirt, socks, undergarments, and state-issued shoes. These items replace anything the inmate wore during transport, ensuring that everyone entering the facility meets security and identification standards. Uniforms also reduce the possibility of contraband and make it easier for staff to recognize inmates from workers, contractors, or visitors. Next, inmates receive bedding materials. Depending on supply levels and current policy, this usually includes a mattress or mattress roll, a blanket, and sometimes a sheet. Bedding is assigned to each inmate and accounted for in the property system. Even these basic items can vary depending on the conditions inside the facility. But Parchman's procedures require that every inmate receive the minimum essential materials for sleeping and basic comfort. Hygiene necessities come next. Staff distribute a small kit containing soap, a toothbrush, toothpaste, and occasionally a comb or razor, depending on the unit and security level. These items form the base of the inmate's personal care. Additional hygiene items can later be purchased through commissary, but intake ensures that every new arrival begins with the essentials. Each item given to the inmate is logged. Staff enter clothing sizes, quantities, and identification numbers on internal forms. This documentation helps track the state's property and prevents disputes later. If an item goes missing or is damaged, the logs allow officers to verify what was originally issued. Not all supplies are permanent. Inmates often receive temporary items that must be returned if they move to another unit or facility. Other items, like uniforms, may need to be exchanged over time as they wear out. All of this is managed through Parchman's internal inventory system to maintain order and consistency. For inmates with medical needs, the supply process may include additional items such as special footwear or medical-approved aids. These are issued only after medical staff confirm the necessity, reinforcing how the intake process connects each department across the prison. Once supplies are issued, inmates must carry everything themselves to the next area of intake. This step may feel simple, but for the inmate, it represents a major transition. They now hold the items that will follow them into their assigned housing unit, the tools that mark the beginning of their daily life inside the prison. State-issued clothing and supplies seem basic, but they serve an important purpose. They standardize appearance, reduce security risks, and ensure that every inmate starts with the minimum items required for hygiene and living. For the inmate, this moment is another reminder that their life in the county jail is behind them. They are now fully inside Parchman's system, equipped with what the state has decided is necessary and nothing more. With clothing issued, medical checks completed, and classification finalized, the inmate reaches one of the most defining moments of the entire intake process: housing assignment. This is where the inmate is placed into the unit where they will live, sleep, and spend almost every hour of their sentence. For many, this moment is the true beginning of life inside Parchman. Housing assignment begins with the classification decision made earlier. Staff review the inmate's custody level, separation needs, medical conditions, and any special alerts. These factors guide placement, but bed availability also plays a major role. Even if an inmate qualifies for a specific unit, they may be temporarily assigned to another area until an appropriate bed opens. Parchman's housing system includes a variety of units, each built for different needs. Maximum security units hold inmates with high custody levels, serious disciplinary histories, or known security risks. These areas have the tightest restrictions, limited movement, and constant supervision. Medium security units house inmates who pose less risk but still require structured oversight. These units often have more movement, larger dorm-style areas, and access to limited programs. Some inmates are placed in protective custody due to gang conflicts, documented threats, or vulnerabilities. Others are assigned to mental health units if the intake screening identified conditions requiring specialized environments. Medical housing units support inmates with chronic illnesses or recovery needs. And for those sentenced to capital punishment, death row remains one of the most restricted areas within the entire facility. Once staff determine the correct placement, officers escort the inmate from the intake area to their new unit. This walk, whether short or long, marks the transition from temporary processing to the place where the inmate will live for months or years. Upon arrival, the unit officer confirms the inmate's identity and assigns them a bunk or cell. This location becomes their official housing spot in the prison system. The first minutes in the housing unit are filled with orientation. Officers explain the rules, schedules, and expectations. Inmates learn when meals are served, how counts are conducted, when they can shower, and how movement works within the building. These rules differ slightly between units, but all follow MDOC's statewide procedures. Inmates also meet the individuals who share their housing space. For many, this is one of the most difficult adjustments. They are now surrounded by people with different backgrounds, sentences, and experiences. The environment can feel tense, structured, or overwhelming depending on the unit. Parchman's long history and unique layout make each housing area feel distinct. Housing assignment also determines access to programs and activities. Some units allow participation in education, work details, or religious services. Others, especially high-security areas, have few privileges. The inmate's daily routine, from waking up to lights out, is shaped entirely by the unit they are placed in. For inmates arriving from county jail, this stage represents a major shift. The temporary world of short-term cells and court dates is replaced by a highly regulated environment where long-term routines dominate. The assigned bunk becomes their personal space, and the unit becomes their entire world inside Parchman. Although housing assignment may seem like a basic administrative step, it is one of the most influential decisions made during intake. It determines the inmate's safety, structure, routine, access to programs, and level of supervision. Every moment from this point forward is shaped by the unit they now call home. Once an inmate reaches their assigned housing unit, they enter a period that is often described as the most challenging part of the entire transfer process. The first hours inside Parchman. Intake, medical screening, and classification are highly structured, but stepping into a long-term housing unit marks the moment when routine becomes real. This is when the inmate begins to understand what daily life inside Mississippi's most historic prison will truly feel like. The transition starts with orientation. After officers confirm the inmate's identity and bunk assignment, they explain the rules of the unit. These rules cover everything from when inmates must stand for count to how they should move between areas. In some units, inmates are instructed on how to request medical attention, how to submit forms, and how meal times work. In higher custody units, officers may give stricter instructions about behavior, movement limits, and communication rules. The inmate is then shown their living space. Depending on classification, this may be a single cell, a two-man cell, or a larger dorm-style area. The bunk becomes their personal area, though it may contain only the state bedding issued earlier. Some inmates quickly arrange their belongings. Others take time to adjust to the confined, structured environment. This is also the moment when inmates begin to meet the people around them. Parchman houses individuals with different backgrounds, charges, and histories. Some inmates have spent years in the system and know the routines well. Others are new and unsure what to expect. The first conversations are usually cautious. Inmates often observe their surroundings before interacting, learning the unspoken rules that govern daily life in each unit. During these early hours, inmates also encounter count procedures, one of the most important parts of prison operations. Officers perform counts to verify the presence and location of every inmate. The schedule may feel repetitive, but it is one of the systems that maintains safety and order inside the prison. New arrivals are expected to follow these procedures immediately. Another key part of this period is adjusting to movement restrictions. Unlike county jails, where movement can be more spontaneous, Parchman controls almost every step an inmate takes. Movement to the chow hall, yard, showers, or medical areas happens only at scheduled times and under supervision. Learning these patterns is part of the adaptation process. Inmates also gain their first sense of the unit's atmosphere. Some units are quieter and more structured, especially medical or protective custody areas. Others, particularly high custody units, can feel tense due to limited privileges and closer confinement. The environment depends on classification, population size, and staff presence. Understanding the rhythm of the unit helps new inmates navigate the daily routine more safely. During the first hours, inmates may also receive information about program access, such as education, work details, or religious services. Not all units offer programs, and availability depends on custody level. For many inmates, the possibility of program participation becomes an important part of adjusting to long-term incarceration. Medical follow-ups are another part of early adjustment. If an inmate's intake screening flags medical needs, they may receive instructions about future appointments, medication schedules, or special restrictions. This ensures that the inmate's health information is properly integrated into their housing placement. Emotionally, these first hours are often heavy. The inmate realizes that the temporary phase, county jail cells, court dates, transport vans, is now over. They are in a permanent environment with longer routines, stricter rules, and broader populations. The first nights in a new housing unit are often the most difficult, as the inmate adjusts to unfamiliar sounds, limited privacy, and a highly regulated schedule. Although this stage may seem simple from the outside, it shapes how the inmate will settle into Parchman. The first hours influence routines, behavior patterns, and overall adaptation to the structure of the prison. And while intake steps like medical checks and classification are critical, it is this early adjustment period that defines the inmate's initial experience inside one of the most significant correctional facilities in Mississippi. By the time an inmate reaches their housing unit inside Parchman, the long and complex transfer process is complete. What began in a county courtroom has moved through layers of paperwork, medical checks, digital records, classification steps, transport logistics, and security procedures. Chapter by chapter, each stage of the journey reveals how Mississippi transitions a person from local custody into the structure of its largest and most historic prison. The process starts with sentencing, when an inmate officially becomes the responsibility of the Mississippi Department of Corrections. Yet this moment does not lead directly to a state prison. Instead, the inmate waits inside a county jail, while MDOC processes commitment documents and schedules transport. This waiting period can last days or weeks, shaped by staffing levels, available space, and statewide movement needs. Once MDOC schedules a transfer, the county prepares the inmate for pickup. Transport orders are issued, paperwork is double-checked, and officers secure restraints. When the transport team arrives, custody shifts from the county to the state, marking the inmate's official entry into Mississippi's correctional network. The transport itself is controlled and quiet. Inmates are moved in secure vans or buses built for long-distance prisoner movement. Routes are kept confidential, and officers follow strict procedures to reduce risks. Hours later, the vehicle reaches the isolated farmland surrounding Parchman, a location chosen long ago to maximize security and distance from populated areas. Entering the prison begins with a layered gate system, identification checks, and vehicle inspections. From there, inmates enter the intake unit, where the real processing happens. Each person goes through searches, property inventory, medical evaluations, and digital record creation. These steps ensure that Parchman has a complete and accurate picture of the inmate's health history and needs before they are placed in any housing unit. Classification becomes a turning point. Based on offense severity, behavior history, medical status, and separation requirements, staff determine the inmate's custody level and appropriate housing area. For many, this decision shapes their entire experience inside Parchman, influencing daily structure, program access, and movement restrictions. With classification complete, inmates receive state clothing, bedding, and hygiene items, the basic supplies that mark the transition from temporary holding to long-term housing. Finally, they are escorted to the unit where they will live. The first hours inside this unit become the moment when the inmate truly feels the weight of their sentence and the reality of life inside Parchman. This entire journey shows how Mississippi's correctional system relies on routine rather than spectacle. Every stage, from courtroom to county jail, from transport to intake, from medical screening to housing, is designed to maintain order, accuracy, and security. The process is not dramatic, yet is powerful in its structure, shaping the lives of thousands who move through it each year. For the inmate, reaching their assigned housing unit is the end of one journey and the beginning of another. The transfer process closes and daily prison life begins. And behind Parchman's long history and vast grounds, every new arrival becomes part of the system that has defined Mississippi corrections for over a century. The journey to Parchman doesn't happen in one step. It moves through courts, county jails, transport vans, intake rooms, and long hallways before an inmate finally reaches their housing unit. Every stage is controlled, documented, and shaped by rules built over decades. By the time an inmate enters their assigned unit, the transfer process is complete, and a new chapter of daily prison life begins inside Mississippi's most historic facility. Thank you for watching this factual look inside the transfer system. For more real, research-based prison documentaries, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.